USB is probably the most universal thing in all of tech. It's on your phone, your laptop, your printer, your grandma's digital picture frame. Three little letters that promise to simplify everything. And yet, somehow, the USB standard has become one of the most confusing naming disasters in modern technology. USB 2.0, 3.0, 3.1 Gen 2, 3.2 Gen 2x2, half of those got renamed at least twice. So let's walk through every version from the very beginning and actually make it make sense. USB 1.0 and 1.1. Before USB showed up in 1996, the back of your computer looked like a junkyard of different ports. Serial ports, parallel ports, PS2 connectors, game ports. Every device had its own special plug. It was like every appliance in your kitchen needing a different shape of electrical outlet. 7 companies, including Intel, Microsoft, and IBM, got together and said enough. USB 1.0 launched with 2 speeds. Low speed ran at 1.5 megabits per second. Full speed hit 12 megabits per second. Neither sounds impressive now, but compared to serial ports, it felt like magic. The real killer feature was hot swapping. You could plug something in without rebooting your whole machine. Before USB, adding a peripheral meant shutting down, plugging in, restarting, and praying the drivers cooperated. That alone was revolutionary. USB 1.1 dropped in 1998, and mostly just fixed bugs and reliability issues. Apple's iMac G3 famously went all in on USB and ditched the old ports entirely. People were furious. Then they bought adapters. Then they moved on. USB 1.1 didn't change the world by being fast. It changed the world by proving that one port could replace a dozen. USB 2.0. By the year 2000, USB had won the port war, but it had a speed problem. MP3 players were getting popular, digital cameras were everywhere, external hard drives were becoming a thing, and transferring files at 12 megabits per second felt like watching paint dry through a straw. Apple's FireWire was already hitting 400 megabits per second and looked like the future. USB needed to answer. USB 2.0 arrived with a high-speed label and a theoretical max of 480 megabits per second. That's 40 times faster than USB 1.1 full speed. In practice, you'd see maybe 280 megabits per second of real throughput. Still, it was more than enough for the era. Intel baked USB 2.0 support directly into its chipsets by 2002, and that was the tipping point. Suddenly, everything just worked out of the box. Keyboards, mice, printers, webcams, flash drives, iPods. USB 2.0 became the default port for basically a decade. Cables cost almost nothing. FireWire cables cost a lot more, and licensing fees scared off cheaper manufacturers. Compatibility was nearly universal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was everywhere. USB 2.0 is the Honda Civic of interface standards. Nothing flashy, nothing exciting, and somehow still on the road 25 years later. USB 3.0. By 2008, the world had moved on to HD video, massive game installs, and external drives that actually needed to perform. USB 2.0's 480 megabits per second was starting to feel like a bottleneck. USB 3.0, branded Superspeed, launched with a theoretical 5 gigabits per second. That's roughly 10 times faster than USB 2.0. The spec also introduced full duplex communication, meaning the port could send and receive data at the same time instead of taking turns. Power delivery jumped from 500 milliamps to 900 milliamps, so devices could charge faster too. You could spot USB 3.0 ports by their blue plastic inserts, a small detail that saved a lot of confusion. Real-world performance landed somewhere around 3 to 4 gigabits per second, depending on the drive. That meant copying a full movie in seconds instead of minutes. External SSDs finally felt worth buying. Backup drives stopped being something you started before dinner and checked after dessert. The first USB 3.0 host controllers came from NEC before Intel integrated them natively. Meanwhile, Thunderbolt was lurking on the Apple side, offering even more bandwidth but at a steep premium. USB 3.0 didn't need to be the fastest option. It just needed to be the fast option that worked everywhere, and it delivered exactly that. USB 3.1 and 3.2. This is where USB's naming went completely off the rails. USB 3.1 arrived in 2013 and introduced a second speed tier. The new one hit 10 gigabits per second and got called Super Speed Plus, or USB 3.1 Gen 2. Fine so far, but then the USB Implementers Forum decided to retroactively rename USB 3.0 to USB 3.1 Gen 1. So now two completely different speeds shared the same version number. Then in 2017, USB 3.2 showed up. It added a 20 gigabit per second mode called USB 3.2 Gen 2x2, which used 2 lanes over a Type-C cable. Reasonable enough. But they also renamed everything again. USB 3.0 became USB 3.2 Gen 1. USB 3.1 Gen 2 became USB 3.2 Gen 2. One standard had now been renamed twice. It was like your street getting a new name every time a neighbor moved in. The USB-IF eventually tried marketing names like Superspeed USB 5 gigabit per second and Superspeed USB 10 gigabit per second. Nobody used them. Manufacturers listed whatever sounded fastest on the box. Consumers had no idea what they were actually buying. Buying a USB 3.2 device could mean 5 gigabits, 10 gigabits, or 20 gigabits depending on which gen you got. If you've ever stared at a spec sheet and felt your brain short-circuit, this era is why. USB Type-C. Technically not a version, it's a connector shape, but you cannot tell the USB story without it. Type-C arrived in 2014 and solved the oldest complaint in tech. It's reversible. No more flipping the plug 3 times before it goes in. The connector uses 24 pins, carries power and data, and supports video output all through one small oval port. Apple put a single Type-C port on the 2015 MacBook, and the internet lost its mind. But the idea was right. One port for everything. The catch is that Type-C tells you nothing about what speed you're getting. A Type-C port can run USB 2.0 speeds, USB 3.2 speeds, USB 4, or even Thunderbolt. The connector is just the shape. The protocol behind it determines how fast it actually goes. Cheap cables and budget devices sometimes shipped with Type-C ports that topped out at USB 2.0, which felt like putting a sports car body on a lawnmower engine. Good luck telling which cable in your bag supports what. They all look identical. Some carry 10 gigabits, some carry 480 megabits. Some can push 100 watts of power, some can barely charge your earbuds. The European Union eventually mandated Type-C as the common charging connector for phones and tablets starting in 2024. If you're still holding onto a drawer full of micro-B cables, I respect the commitment. Drop that in the comments. USB 4. In 2019, something big happened behind the scenes. Intel donated the Thunderbolt 3 protocol to the USB-IF. USB 4 was built on top of it. That meant USB finally got tunneling, a system where data, display output, and PCIe bandwidth share the same pipe dynamically. Need more video bandwidth for your monitor? USB 4 shifts resources on the fly, running a lighter display, more room for storage speed. It's like a highway that adds lanes where traffic is heaviest. The base spec supported 20 gigabits per second, and the full implementation hit 40 gigabits per second using 2 lanes over Type-C. There is no Type-A version of USB 4, Type-C only, full stop. USB 4 also rolled in USB power delivery, supporting up to 100 watts of charging and later up to 240 watts with the extended power range spec. That's enough to charge a gaming laptop through the same cable that transfers your files and runs your monitor. Backward compatibility with USB 3.2 and Thunderbolt 3 was baked in, so older gear still worked. The downside was that USB 4 certification was optional for some features, so 2 USB 4 devices could perform very differently. It was the right idea wrapped in inconsistent execution. Adoption was slow, partly because laptop makers had to decide how much of the spec to actually implement. Thunderbolt 4, built on the same DNA, often beat USB 4 devices on consistency alone. USB 4 version 2.0. Announced in late 2022, this is the current peak of the USB spec. It doubles the top-end bandwidth to 80 gigabits per second symmetrically. In asymmetric mode, One direction can push up to 120 gigabits per second, while the other drops to 40. That kind of throughput matters for external GPUs, multi-monitor setups, and high-speed storage arrays. The speed bump comes from a new signaling method called PAAM3, which encodes more data per cycle without requiring entirely new cables. Existing 40 gigabit passive Type-C cables can handle the 80 gigabit mode, which is a rare win for backward compatibility. No new cable, no new connector, just more speed through smarter signaling. Thunderbolt 5, which Intel announced around the same time, is essentially built on the same foundation. Products started appearing in 2024 and are still rolling out. It's early days, and most people won't need this bandwidth for a while. But that's exactly what people said about USB 3.0 back in 2008. The pattern is always the same. Overkill today becomes the baseline tomorrow. So that's USB, from a 12 megabit replacement for your keyboard port, all the way to an 80 gigabit tunnel that carries power, video, and data through a single reversible plug. The naming got worse at almost every step. The technology got better at every single one. And somehow, 3 decades in, we're still arguing about which cable is in the junk drawer. What USB version are most of your devices actually running right now? I'm genuinely curious. Drop it in the comments, hit the like button if this cleared things up, and if you want to see how all of this connects to Thunderbolt, that video is coming next. Click the video on screen right now.